Welcome back to repotting season. Thank you for bearing with me last week. I had surgery and was just not feeling well, so I took time to rest so that I could be fully present with you. I am feeling much better. Today we're talking about our environment. So this all started because my dear beautiful plant here is really struggling. And honestly, I thought it had pests. Well, initially, I thought it was just acclimating to its environment. Then I thought it had pests, and I have basically repotted this. I have sprayed it down. It does not have pests. And then I realized there's a vent right there. And I keep my house at a cool 67 at night, 69 in the daytime. And so it is getting blasted with cold air. Now this likes warmer temperatures and humidity, and it is not getting that in the situation that it's in right now. And so the environment is not serving the plant. Although it is getting adequate light, it is getting adequate water, the humidity level could be better. Because of the vent, the humidity level is not where it should be. There's a humidifier that actually sits just a few feet away, and it's struggling. And it's not struggling because the plant doesn't want to live and thrive. It's struggling because the environment is not serving it. And so sometimes we are in environments where it is just not serving us, and we may need to either cut ourselves out of that situation, or we need to acclimate a little bit better. Sometimes that means actually cutting off the bad stuff, removing, cutting out toxic partners, toxic family, not putting ourselves in situations or toxic environments. Sometimes we don't have that luxury. Maybe it's a work situation, but you might just need to find a new job to remove yourself from that environment. And sometimes it's changing the environment to suit you better. And so this example would be like getting one of those vent directional thingies where I can push the air in the opposite direction so it's not actually hitting the plant. Now, what I am gonna do is I did buy one of those directional thingies. I'm gonna put it up, and I'm actually going to also chop off some dead leaves. So I will have some cuttings of this soon in the plant shop. But we live in a culture that worships effort, especially when you're a woman, especially when you're a Black woman. You may have been taught that if things aren't working out, just try harder and do it differently and keep going. And that shit is exhausting. Push through, prove yourself, grind until it bends in your favor. And that is exhausting. Let me tell you a quick story about an old job that I had. I started this job, first job out of college, loved it. I was making the most money of my life, and great. It was easy. I did well. I didn't have to think about it after I left. It was perfect. Then I became a corporate trainer. Loved it even more. I got to show my personality. I got to help people, and I got to teach. That's exactly what I loved doing. And then I got promoted to manager. And that is the moment it went downhill. I realized the environment that I was in as a manager sucked. It didn't serve me as a person, my personality. I didn't like the politics. I was one of very few people who looked like me in that position. And so we know that that's a different dynamic where you're kind of navigating in between worlds a little bit. And that sucked. I was so miserable for about 2.5 years before I actually left my job. And I cried every day on the way to work. Now, was it me that was struggling, or was it the environment? I think it was a little bit of both. Sometimes I wanted to just just quit and just figure it out. But I knew I couldn't do that. I had bills to pay. And so I went every day. I cried on the way to work, and I was relieved on the way home. So in those moments, a lot of people in my life would be like, just bear it, just deal with it. But honestly, I was putting in the effort. I just wasn't getting the result that felt good for me. And it's important to know that effort doesn't fix bad soil. Effort doesn't expand a pot that's too small. And effort doesn't make the sun shine in a dark ass room. And sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you try, how much effort you're putting in, how positive you are. You need to get out of the environment that you're in. Quit your job. I'm not advocating for you to quit your job. God, I feel like I'm always having to give a disclaimer. Don't go quit your job. That's not what I'm saying. Please don't go quit your job. I can't help you if you do and you can't pay your bills. Sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you're working, how much effort you're putting in, because your environment is working against you. Like this, it doesn't matter how much humidity and bright indirect light and water this is getting. The environment is causing this. It's getting perfect conditions. You wanna know how I know it's perfect conditions in here? There's another plant right here, and that bad boy puts out a new leaf like every week. 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. It's been thriving for years. It loves this room. It loves this environment. It actually sat in this spot right here. So the point is that what's good for one plant is not always good for another plant. What's good for one person is not always good for the next person. And so we have to stop comparing ourselves to other people, but we also have to start realizing that sometimes we just have to be removed from the environment that we're in. So sometimes we put ourselves in positions and in environments and spaces that prevent us from growing. And much like our plants, we have to make sure that we're in the right environment for the growth in the life that we want to lead. I feel like we don't really talk about environment enough with we do talk about environment when it's very crystal clear and it's like glaringly obvious that the environment is causing negative outcomes. But when we are in a space where we appear to be thriving and it like everything should be perfect and it's just not happening, those are the times where we need to pay extra attention. The storm's moving away. It's getting quieter. Those are the times where we need to really pay attention to where we are, what we want, and what things are causing us not to actually get the thing that we want. So I had to identify what that was and ultimately remove myself from that situation and continue thriving. Now, after leaving that job, I started running my business. I opened a plant shop. I'm doing a podcast. I do TikToks and YouTube and all of these things that make me feel really empowered and like I love my life. And I don't know that I would be where I am now had I stayed in that place. And so the thing that looked like it should be comfortable because it was easy and I was making lots of money and yeah, I had a long commute. Yeah, I was kind of miserable there, but like I could suffer through it, but I realized that I didn't want to suffer through it. And so I had to remove myself from that position. And I am so grateful that I did. Now, I say that to say a lot of people, especially Black women, are conditioned to believe that effort is enough. And if you are a Black woman, you know that effort is never enough. There's so much more into it. It's optics. It's making sure that I appear a certain way. And when you show up authentically yourself, yes, your people are attracted to you and you're more fulfilled and you feel comfortable. And that is where I want all of us to be. But we know that that's not always the reality, especially when we're working in corporate America or working for someone else. Even on social media, it can get really difficult because there's always going to be something that someone doesn't like. There's always going to be judgment. And so we have to evaluate if the comfortability that we're feeling or uncomfortability is that a word? Uncomfortability? We're going with it. That we're feeling. Y'all, it's been a long day, okay? It's been a long day. We have to evaluate if that uncomfortableness, is that a word? I haven't had enough sleep clearly for the last week. The discomfort That's a word. The discomfort that we're feeling, we have to evaluate if that is something that we're comfortable with or if we need to make a change in our environment so that we can actually start pursuing our goals and doing the things that we want to do. Now, I said all of that, but it is much easier to say all of that than to actually do it in practice. So I understand that I'm in a really different position than I am now, but I cried for 2 years. So I didn't just start hating my job and then leave. I struggled with it for a while before I was so uncomfortable that I had to pick myself or staying in a job that paid me a lot of money that I was miserable every day at. And so sometimes we are struggling through it until we kind of figure out what change we need to make in that environment or what thing. Maybe it's not you removing yourself from the environment, but maybe it's you removing someone else from the environment. Or it's applying for a different position in a company, moving to a different team in a company. Maybe it is removing a disrespectful partner from your life or a disrespectful family member from your life. And so sometimes it's not you that need to make the change. It's you need to distance yourself from someone else. And sometimes it's not that you need to remove yourself from the situation, but maybe you need to remove someone else or flip it on its head and have a different perspective. So maybe you're approaching something a certain way and you're just feeling bad about it and it's not working. You're feeling miserable, like things are just not working out. Maybe it's like approaching it with a different perspective or attitude shift. There's lots of different ways to approach this, but the biggest thing that I want you to take away is sometimes things look perfect on paper. This plant should be thriving. So sometimes it's the individual, sometimes it's the environment. I don't want you to get caught up in the illusion of perfection. We know things look great on paper. We know, especially if you've been collecting plants for a long time, you have some of you go real crazy. I'm like a simple collector. I have way too many plants to be doing all that insanity with like checking the pH. I don't do all that. And everything gets tap water. Everything gets tap water. Everything gets tap water. I don't have time to go buy distilled water. So don't get caught up in the illusion of effort, of perfection, because just because you're putting in effort, just because things look perfect, doesn't mean that you're going to be okay with it. And I think it's important to know that it's okay if you're not okay with it. If you work at something and it's not perfect and you're a perfectionist like me, it's okay to be disappointed. What's not okay is to stay in that disappointment so long that it starts preventing you from moving forward. So take your lumps, have your moments of disappointment, work through those emotions, and then move along. And so I think a lot of us get caught up in, I want this thing, or I want to be confident, or I want to love myself. I want to be comfortable in the body I'm in. I struggle with this thing, and we stay stuck in that negative space. But what we need to do is feel what we feel in that negative space and then make a conscious decision to move forward. And so it's the making the decision to move forward and then actually moving forward is where a lot of people struggle. But that's why we have people who are 40, 50, 60 years old and they're still talking about shit that happened to them when they were 15 because they haven't made the decision to deal with what you deal with. Now, I have said this a little bit already. I've said this already that I didn't have the best childhood. I had some struggles. There were really, really good times, but there were some really shitty things that happened, and I don't get to take that out on anyone else, not even my parents. And it takes a lot of therapy to be able to say the things that happened to me in my childhood are my responsibility to deal with. And I understand that my parents did the best with what they had, and I am not gonna hold it against them as an adult. it's not fair. I don't want people holding shit against me that I've made a mistake and atoned for, and you're still constantly holding it against me. I don't want to live that way, and so I don't want to do that to other people. And so I think a lot of us get so caught up in being angry at people and angry at situations that we stay stuck in that place and we don't actually move forward. And so it is a decision that you have to make, and sometimes you have to make that decision over and over and over. But the more you make it, the less you're gonna have to make it, because it's gonna start sticking. And so that is, again, easier said than done. But if you commit to yourself and you commit to whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, your goals, you wanna be confident, you wanna quit your job, leave a partner, whatever it is that you wanna do, those decisions sometimes are made on a daily basis. Sometimes they're made on an hourly basis. And start small and just make the decision. I know that's easier said than done. So let's talk about what it looks like when you're in the wrong container. Maybe you've been resting, you've been sleeping so much, but you're still exhausted. It could be that you're just being drained by the environment that you're in. I know for sure when I was driving an hour each way on my commute, I would get home, eat dinner, go right to bed around 7 p.m. I worked at 5, got off at 5. It took me an hour to get home. I would eat dinner and then go to bed around 7 p.m. That's a very small margin of time between getting home, eating dinner, and going to bed. And so I would wake up the next morning about 15 to 20 minutes before I had to actually leave out the door, and I would be exhausted all day. And then I would get home and do the same thing over and over. So sometimes you are sleeping so much, but you are still tired. It could be that your space, your physical space, is not serving you because it's draining you so much that all you have the energy to do is sleep. You may feel smaller when you enter a room. You may feel like you're just surviving. You may not be thriving in any significant ways, just surviving the space that you're in. Maybe the people around you only know how to relate to old versions of you. So this is something that really happens when people have made the decision to actually move forward. So we talked about actually making the decision. When you make those decisions, the people from your past, they may be trying to pull you back to who you were before. And so it's important to not let the opinions and actions of other people affect the decision that you have made for yourself. It is okay to disappoint your family when you've made a decision that is comfortable for you. Ultimately, you have to live with the decision. You have to live with you every single day for the rest of your life. It does not matter, even if it's your mom. It's important to know that even if it disappoints the people closest to you and most important to you, you have to live with you for the rest of your life. Ultimately, you have to live with you and God. And so as long as it's satisfying to God and it satisfies you, everyone else is going to have to learn to live with the decision you made. As uncomfortable as that may make you or them, it is what it is. Ultimately, the decision is yours to make. And once you make that decision, you have to live with it. Maybe you're like me. I get really uncomfortable if I'm just maintaining. I do not know how to sit still. I do not know how to just be comfortable maintaining. I always have to be expanding in some way, creatively, business-wise, personal life-wise, with God. All of these things need to be constantly expanding. And as soon as it's stagnant, I get uncomfortable. And that is okay. I feel like this is who God made me. Like it's not in a bad way that I'm uncomfortable. Does that mean I can't sit in a room and just like sit in a room for a day? No, that's not what I'm talking about. But if I go a significant amount of time in the same position that I'm in, that I started in, so maybe I go 2 years and I see no significant growth in my personal life, in my spiritual life, in well-being, that for me is uncomfortable. That just feels like I've hit a ceiling and I have no ability to actually push through it. And so that, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Sometimes it's just a small voice internally that tells us, I've outgrown this, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this, this doesn't feel good for me. And we gaslight ourselves into thinking, oh, it's like, ignore that. Oh, I'm doing this because I need money. And I think a lot of us, that is the thing that holds us. Again, I'm not telling you to quit your job, but I'm telling you, your job is convincing you that there's nothing better out there, and there is something better out there. Don't quit your job before you find it. Find it first and then quit your job. But go start looking. If you hate your job and you are uncomfortable, there is better out there for you. I don't think that you should be miserable. Content, maybe there are people who like work at a company for 20 years and they're content. They come do their job, they go home. They don't feel positive or negative about the work. I think that's okay. What I don't think is okay is for you to be miserable at your job. There is a perfect position for everyone. I don't care what anyone says. I said what I said. I believe what I believe. I stayed at a job for almost 10 years because they made you think that you're not gonna, doing what you're doing here, you're not gonna make what you make. And that was a bold-faced lie. Yes, you will, and more. There is so much opportunity out there, and I think sometimes we get so stuck and comfortable in the space because it's comfortable and it's guaranteed, like this is guaranteed money right now. But I think sometimes it's taking that little step of faith, pray about it, give it to God, ask for direction and discernment, and then go from there. I'm not telling you to go quit your job. Please don't go quit your job before you have something else lined up. And don't DM me because I ain't got nothing for you. So let me tell you a quick story that I don't always share. Yeah, I'm going to tell it. I talked about my childhood on the first episode, and I don't always talk about how angry I was at my dad. I had to make a decision. Am I going to let this eat me up? Am I going to suffer and suffer and suffer and be mad and angry at the world and take it out on other people that have nothing to do with what's going on with my internal like turmoil? Or am I going to forgive and let it go? Now, like most things I say, much easier said than done. It's so much easier to say, just forgive and let it go. I don't operate that way. I am stubborn. I am opinionated. I am stubborn. But I knew staying angry, harboring animosity, hatred almost. I didn't hate my dad, but I was like real close. I had to make a decision that was no longer serving me. And the moment I let it go, opportunities in other places opened up. I feel like I was putting so much energy and effort into being angry and upset and like, what was me almost? Like, damn, you couldn't do it for your kids? Like that kind of mentality. There's a lot of stuff I do selfishly now that I get it. I'm 38 now, so I understand the mind of a 38-year-old now. Now, I didn't understand back then, but I understand how things transpired the way that they transpired. I also went to school for psychology. That's what my bachelor's is in. And so I understand childhood development and trauma. And I get it. It wasn't just him. It was him and his childhood trauma raising me. And so I had a decision to make. I can be angry. I can dwell on the past. I can do all of these things that are going to keep me stuck in a place that I'm miserable in. Or I can forgive and move forward. That is the decision I had to make. Do I stay where I'm at and be angry and upset and question why? Or do I forgive, understand that my parents were dealing with their own traumas, their own issues going on, and they were doing the best that they could with what they have? Or do I say, fuck it, I'm just gonna be mad until the day I die? who in their right mind just wants to be mad until the day they die? Now, there are some really miserable people in the world, but that ain't me. I enjoy life and I want to live it to its fullest, and I want to be happy and jovial and positive and actually feel fulfilled. And I was not feeling that way. And so I had to realize that I was being limited by those emotions, not out of drama, not out of, I don't know. I don't even know that it was out of like anger. I think it was more out of hurt. It wasn't out of hate. It was definitely out of hurt. And because I had the desire to grow in that area of my life and to heal that relationship, I was outgrowing that space. I was outgrowing that anger and that hurt. And I had to make a decision to deal with it and move forward. Now, therapy is always at the top of my list. I don't care what anyone says. Get a therapist. Lots of prayer. And now that wasn't an easy decision because I was so hurt and I was so, hurt's not the right word. It was more than hurt. It was like devastating for me, which caused me to do a lot of crazy shit in my life. I'm not in jail. A lot of craziness in my life. And because I had to make that decision to move forward, I was called selfish. I was in a relationship when I started this process and I was questioned, like, you're changing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm changing. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying not to hate myself for the rest of my life. And so it was very, very difficult in the beginning. But again, once you make the decision, you got to stick it through, because that decision is really what's going to spring you into the next environment. You don't know your loyalty to anybody but yourself. I think that's the point of this whole episode. You don't owe loyalty to anybody but yourself. Live with your decisions because you have to be happy with them, because ultimately it's you and nobody else in this world. Even if you have a big family and you got kids and a husband, none of that matters. You have to live with you for the rest of your life. Got it? Okay, so all of that is well and good. What does it mean when we're actually shifting our environment? It doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes it's just tweaking things inside our environment. So let's talk about the job example. Maybe you're in a department where you just are not loving the work. Apply for another position inside your company. So at least you're still with the same company. Maybe you find a better position where you're more comfortable, or a better team where you're more comfortable, or it does mean leaving your environment and you go find a new job. But sometimes we don't have to make such drastic changes. Maybe it's a perspective shift. Like, once I realized that my relationship with my dad was difficult because I was so hurt, I was always guarding myself in situations because I was expecting to be hurt. Once I realized that and understood things from his perspective, that is when it broke for me. Now, nothing really bothers me when it comes to him. I just want us to be good. Life is short. He had cancer a couple of years ago. Thank goodness he's in remission. But like, that really shook me up, because there will be a day where he's not here anymore. And then I would be miserable, because now you have all of the regret because you didn't take the action to fix the situation or fix the environment. Sometimes it's shifting your social circle. Get rid of those toxic friends. As much as we love them, we love a good toxic moment sometimes, but that could be the problem. Maybe you are a different person around a certain group of friends, and you're not that person with your church friends or your work friends, but like your friends from back home. I'm a totally different person when I go home. Totally different person. Not in a bad way, but like, I feel like I've known these people most of my life. I can be a little bit different. But sometimes being a little bit different, like really being yourself, brings out the worst parts of yourself. And so maybe you just need to not go around those people. Maybe you just have a lot going on. Maybe you have a lot of kids, or you just have a big family and it's just crowded and noisy and like, it's just a lot. you need to find pockets of solitude in that space. I have a huge family. My grandparents had a lot of children because they had a farm and they needed farm hands. Honestly. And so what comes when you have a lot of kids, you get a lot of grandkids. So I have lots of cousins. And when we get around each other, it is noisy. It is a lot going on. I tend to get overstimulated, and so I like to remove myself from the situation. And that can be seen as like, oh, she's standoffish, but like really I'm just about to crash out because y'all are doing too much talking in here and I live alone and it's usually quiet. And so I can't function. And so sometimes you have to remove yourself temporarily, step away for a little bit, but find pockets of solitude in those moments. Maybe it's like your physical space. So the best thing I ever did when I broke up with my ex was start buying plants. I was able to bring as many plants as I wanted into my space and really make it my own. Now that spiraled into like a little bit of a plant shopping problem. That is not really a problem because it could be so much worse. But I quickly went from no plants to 400 plants to I don't even know how many are in here now in a very short amount of time. And so I really created a space that made me insanely happy, and I would not change it for the world. I love the amount of plants in my house. I don't love watering day, but I tolerate watering day because the amount of plants in my house bring me so much pleasure, so much joy. And so I really created a space where I am physically comfortable. Now I'm in a bigger house now, but when I was in a 1-bedroom apartment, it was like you're doing this walking to avoid running into plants, and I loved it. I'm gonna put more plants in here because the house is so much bigger. It doesn't really feel like there's this many plants in here. Although there's 400, it doesn't look like it, so there's so much more space. That makes me insanely happy. So design your physical space. Now, it may be your house. If you have a partner or roommates, maybe you can't do this through the whole house, but you have a space that's yours, your bedroom. Maybe you have a home office or a she shack or I don't know, man cave, whatever it is. Create that space to be yours. Add things that bring you pleasure. If you love anime, add some anime stuff. I don't really know. And if that brings you joy, please immerse your space in all of the things that you love. Don't go broke doing it because this is a really expensive habit. Peace is a non-negotiable in my home. That is a hard, fast rule. I don't partake in drama in my house. I'm not arguing with nobody in my house. I'm not doing anything that disrupts my peace and my mental sanity in my home. That is a hard, fast rule. Now, the reason is because me and my ex fought a lot in my home. A whole nother story, but I fought a lot at home in a relationship, and that is something I refuse to do now. I don't partake in drama. I'm not going to argue. I don't do that. And if it's disrupting my peace, it needs to leave out of my home expeditiously. And so really making sure that you curate a space that has rules that bring you pleasure. It brings me so much joy to live in a home where I don't have to worry about arguing and fighting. And that is something that is a non-negotiable. I won't do it. This is a peaceful, pleasant place to be with lots of oxygen and greenery. And I refuse to allow negativity in this space again. So making joy a non-negotiable in your physical space is something that you can do to really own the environment and really change the approach. So this is what I like to call micro repotting. Small intentional changes to your space, to your mindset, to your environment that really make a huge difference. Sometimes you don't need a whole new repot. Sometimes you just need to add some new soil on top, and that is okay. And that means sometimes you don't need to quit your job, or you don't need to break up. Maybe you two need to go to couples therapy and like hash some things out. That's possible. Maybe you just need to step down from the promotion and be like, I like my job. I was very comfortable before. I want to step out. I don't want to be a manager. I wish I had been like, I don't want to be a manager, but I didn't do that and I was miserable for 2 years. Maybe that is something that you need to do, but sometimes it is not a big, like, huge decision that you need to make to feel more comfortable in your environment. So of course, I'm gonna end this with something to sit with. Where in your life do you feel root bound? Are you trying to thrive in conditions that can't hold your growth anymore? And what would it look like to repot? Not when you feel ready or when you're more comfortable, but now. As always, these are things just to think about. I know that we all have things that we're going through, and so I hope that this episode really starts moving you towards some decisions that you need to make so that you can start thriving in your own life again. That's it for this episode. Remember, you're not too much. You're not asking for too much. Maybe you're just planted in a space that wasn't designed for everything that you're becoming. As always, if this resonated with you, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. And if you know someone who is ready for some environment shifts, please share this episode with them and tell them to subscribe as well. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at curvyplantlady. And as always, I will see you next week.